Welcome to Only in America. I'm Ali Nurani. Big episode this week, folks, covering a lot of ground with two fantastic guests. And starting us off is Molika Gupta, an H-4 visa recipient who for many years was not authorized to work.
I remember that the most devastating effect was on my confidence. Even with a supportive spouse, my basic decision-making power was severely limited, and my sense of freedom was curtailed. I remember going into a black hole of depression and loss of sense of self-worth and questioning myself over and over again. Why me? What wrong have I done? It's really not a good place to be in.
Then I chat with Bill Kerr, a Harvard Business School professor who challenges Silicon Valley leadership to make a better case for high-skilled immigration.
Politics determines immigration. Business economics, that's important, but politics is what determines it. And if we don't have a better way of communicating out to the country, and then I'd argue to the world, how global talent is beneficial, then that environment may change on you.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Nurani.
America's elected representatives have a duty to regulate who comes in and when. In meeting this responsibility, it helps to remember that America's immigrant history made us who we are. Amid all the complications of policy, may we never forget that immigration is a blessing and a strength.
That was President George W. Bush speaking at a naturalization ceremony last week at the George W. Bush Presidential Center in Dallas. It was there that dozens of immigrants took their oath of allegiance to become United States citizens. You know, it's always nice to hear a president speak to our values as a nation that welcomes the world's best and brightest. And speaking of the best and brightest, we are coming up on April 1st, the day when U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services begins to accept petitions for H-1B visas. According to the feds, the H-1B program allows companies in the United States to temporarily employ foreign workers in occupations that require the theoretical and practical application of a body of highly specialized knowledge. And every year, for years now, the 65,000 H-1B visas that USCIS provides are snapped up in a matter of days. Look, if there was ever an example of a visa program completely out of sync with our economic needs, it is the H-1B program. But it's actually more complicated than work visas alone. So let's take a step back to look at this particular part of America's immigration system. And let's start with a quote from Max Frisch, a Swiss novelist who wrote, "We asked for workers, we got people instead." When it comes to immigration policy, it is remarkable how quickly we want to treat immigrant workers as cogs in the wheel. But as we come to know immigrants, their families, their dreams, we quickly realize that they are just like every American. They are people, not just workers. In the case of the H-1B visa, companies across the country petition for the worker who meets certain criteria. That worker, because, well, he or she is a real person, often brings their spouse and children with them to the U.S. Their spouse and children reside in the U.S. under what is called an H-4 visa. For years, H-4 visa recipients were unable to work. But in 2015, then USCIS Director Leon Rodriguez announced that the Department of Homeland Security would extend work authorization to certain H-4 recipients who are seeking employment-based lawful permanent resident status. Currently, about 90,000 people are work authorized and contributing because of this change to the H-1B program. But on February 25th of this year, the Trump administration issued a proposal to revoke work authorizations for these H-4 visa holders. So with a thank you to our friends at forward.us for the introduction, my first guest today is one of those 90,000 spouses, Molika Gupta. Molika is a patent licensing professional based in Detroit. She holds 2 master's degrees. Molika and I talked about what H-4 holders have to endure, her inspirational advocacy work to protect work authorizations, and what she would like to say to Ivanka Trump. Molika, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much, Ali, for the chance to speak about my story on H-4 EAD.
First, before we start talking about the program, tell me a little about yourself. How do you find yourself in the States?
Sure. So I came to the US in 2013 after marriage on a spousal visa. In India, I had earned bachelor's and master's degree and was working in patent licensing. After quickly realizing that I couldn't work on the dependent spousal visa, I decided to pursue my second master's in patent management from Chicago. I gained employment immediately after post-graduation, and the company I was working with filed my H-1B. But it was not picked up in the H-1B lottery. Unfortunately, this meant I had no option but to convert my visa status to H-4. I continued earning interviews from organizations, but due to the visa's lack of accompanying work authorization, employers could not hire me no matter how qualified I was. The unpredictability of the H-1B visa lottery and subsequently the non-working H-4 visa grounded my career to a halt, preventing me from helping to boost the American economy. And then in 2017, I finally got my H-4 EAD.
And this is what the Obama administration did very, very late in their term to provide employment authorization to H-4 recipients. Is that right?
Yes. So the decision came in 2015, and that is when it allowed people like me on H-4 to be able to apply for work authorization card.
In 2017, you get your work authorization and...
Yes, but because of the gap in my resume, the employers couldn't understand what exactly happened. And because majority of them are not aware about, how the immigration process works in terms of the burdens and the struggles an immigrant applicant is going through, it became extremely difficult to get an employer sponsor my visa or to file my H-1B visa again. So now I currently work as a freelance patent licensing professional with a gap on my resume, and I belong to a category of highly skilled non-IT professionals, and it is still difficult to secure a permanent position even with the extension of work authorization of H-4 visa holders.
Describe to me how that makes you feel.
Right off the bat, I remember that the most devastating effect that was, I was not able to get a position or get hired was on my confidence. Even with a supportive spouse, my basic decision-making power was severely limited and my sense of freedom was curtailed. I remember going into a black hole of depression and loss of sense of self-worth and questioning myself over and over again. Why me? What wrong have I done? It just puts you in a situation of victim mentality because you are not just financially dependent on your spouse, but it also puts a pressure on you mentally and emotionally and economically. It's really not a good place to be in.
So then who did you turn to at that time?
So at that time, the non-working phase forced me to ask myself tough questions about what my purpose is, what more can I do? What else is out there? That's when I decided to pursue my passion of writing and building a community of immigrant spouses living in similar situations to me. And I started a Facebook group, which is called Immigrant Spouses Rewrite Your Story. And the purpose was to coach and connect with other spouses who are taking various journeys in different visa categories. And at that time, my whole purpose was to get out of my head and to connect with the rest of the people out there in the world or in the US who have gone through a similar journey. And now that group has now grown to more than 2,000 talented and highly skilled individuals from all over the world.
Wow.
And and now also coach immigrant spouses to live out of their passions amidst chaos and uncertainty. I also help them. So I basically connect with individuals who have been through this journey or are on this journey. I help them to transition career and life with confidence, gratitude, and self-belief, and that they are so much more than an external visa situation, which forces them into a victim mentality and hopelessness.
Yeah. That's absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
So was there a moment when you met somebody online through the Facebook group or in person where you realized, okay, this is the right thing to do?
Yes. I'm not just online. I kept meeting offline, wherever I went. Yes. Whether it's gym, it's grocery stores, it's libraries, because there really is not much places where you can work apart from doing volunteer work or hanging out in libraries. So I kept meeting these people in libraries and I kept understanding that there are just so many talented individuals with double masters, with advanced degrees who are forced to sit in their homes and wait for their EADs or their green cards.
like you said earlier, it's about more than a visa or an external visa situation. It's about valuing work and valuing people and valuing the contributions of women and spouses and men who are spouses in this situation.
Absolutely. It's much more than that. In terms of numbers, if we talk about the women who are in this situation, they are professionals from various fields. They are doctors, nurses, physicians, counselors, architects, city planners with advanced and technical degrees and very well spoken and very well educated. In their home countries, they are very well doing. They are earning good salaries. And now when they come here and they realize that they cannot work, it takes a toll on their mental health, on their well-being, on their confidence. And more than that, just the existence of their own self, that why am I even here? So it's much more than just numbers and visa situation.
So whether it's yourself or somebody that you met and have been working with in the community, what is that feeling like when you are back to work and back to contributing?
It is a feeling, it's like you have been released from being strangulated to death and being given a new life. I'm sure it sounds dramatic, but that's how it feels. It feels like a gas pedal has been lifted off. It's a release, and now you can just fly and can have or aspire or be anything or anybody you want to be.
And so to hear that the Trump administration wants to eliminate employment authorizations for H-4 visa holders, what is the feeling and the anxiety among the community now?
Well, first of all, the H-4 EAD has been given to people who are on the path to become future citizens. They are already in that line of green card. And the reason they are still waiting is because of the huge green card backlog especially for Indians. It has now increased to around 150 years. So anybody who's applying in June 2018, for example, has to wait for next 150 years to get the green card. And
how many years?
150 years. According to a report, it was 70 years in 2011, and now it's 150 years for getting a green card on employment-based green card.
Wow. That feels like a long time.
Yeah, it feels like it feels like too much. I might not be even living. Yes. I might not be even living to get my green card and to actually work.
So who did this report? I've never heard that number.
Oh yeah, that's you can just Google it. It's out there. Yes.
So you have to wait 150 years to get a green card?
Yes. The estimated wait for employment-based green card for people born in India has increased to 150 years for someone who has applied in June 2018. And that was precisely the reason why H-4 EAD was granted in 2015. Because of the huge green card backlog.
Got it. So now to hear going back to the question, now to hear that as the community is waiting up to 150 years for their green card, I'm sorry, that just is I can't get over that. The administration would like to take away the EADs, the employment authorizations.
It just does not make any sense to remove work authorization from more than 100,000 individuals, predominantly who are women, and who are in the process of becoming legal permanent residents. And for what? I mean, there is just no reasons out there. I mean, even if you talk about the huge loss, I mean, even if you talk about the numbers, there's a huge economic loss on national and local level. I mean, people who are on EADs are already contributing in taxes locally and nationally. So it just does not make any sense to get rid of an authorization card which allows women who have been waiting for last 10 years. And mind you, the people who are on H-4 EAD now have been on H-4 visas for at least more than 5 years. So it's not like that somebody, tomorrow an immigrant spouse come to US and they are granted a work authorization card on the airport. That's not how it's happening. So these already are waiting to become a citizen. And now that there is just no solution to the green card backlog, H-4 EAD was given to these women who can at least start working again in their careers, who can start contributing to the US economy, to the local economies, and to their own well-being. Now they are being asked that, guess what? You know what? We know that you're waiting for last 10 years, but now we don't want you to work anymore. That's how it feels.
Right. How do the employers feel, or is the employer community engaging in the advocacy to protect the employment authorizations?
Well, it's a huge burden if we look at the numbers on employee turnover costs. Since 2015, at least 40,000 spouses started working in highly skilled jobs in several organizations. So without an EAD, these workers will lose their jobs, forcing overhead costs of hiring and training new employees, which is estimated to be more than $4,000 per employee.
And as an employer, why spend that money when you already have somebody good on staff?
What H-4 EAD allows is you to give an ability as an applicant to apply for that job. Work authorization card does not mean authorizes any employer to hire me. It only allows me to apply for that position to compete with the rest of the candidates in the hiring process. So when an H-4 EAD is hired, that person has already gone through that selection process and interview process. So the question of good or bad is already decided when the employer decides to hire someone like H-4 EAD.
Right. Because the employer is not sponsoring the H-4 EAD. The employer is you're part of the applicant pool.
Exactly. That's all about it.
Yep. So what's next for the campaign? But what's next really for the community of spouses that you've engaged in all these different ways?
Well, the community I'm engaged in, they are preparing to embrace if there are any potential revocations. But apart from that, I'm also involved with an advocacy called Save H-4 EAD Advocacy Group, which is a group of more than 20 people from all over the US. And we are working with lawmakers. We are meeting congressmen and congresswomen, and we are sharing our stories. We have been also raising awareness in the US in the general audience by reaching out to media houses and writing articles and, giving interviews. And so now, and we are also preparing for the commenting period if there is a potential decision, hanging. So anybody who is listening, and they can connect to the advocacy Save H-4 EAD through Twitter handle @Save H-4 EADs, or you can search Facebook group Save H-4 EAD, which is again a group of 6,400 members in 22 states.
And so let's say Ivanka Trump has done a lot of work, both domestically and internationally, on women empowerment and women contributions to the economy. Let's say she's listening today. What would you want to tell her?
I would like to tell her that for a country developed and the most powerful nation like the US, it's ironical that a talented and individual woman like me, who is well-spoken, who is very well educated, and who wants to contribute to the US economy, to the society, and to my well-being and to my family, it's ironical that today in the age of equality, and when we're talking about equal wages, equal rights and everything, I'm fighting to keep my right to work. And the right to work is the basic right. And it's horrendous and it's torturous to wake up every single day and think about, and the only thought I have in my mind every single day is that whether I can work tomorrow or not.
And let's say the employment authorization is revoked and we're unable to push to get it back. What happens for yourself and the community that you built?
Ali, honestly, I don't know what to do in a situation where you don't deserve to be in. I don't know what should be my answer. It's really, it feels like a nightmare and a thought which I don't want to even think about. I don't know what the answer should be.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. I want to thank you so much for joining the conversation today. But more than that, thank you for your leadership, because it takes an incredible amount of courage to advocate for yourself in this way and build a community, especially when things feel like they're so tenuous. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And actually, can I ask you one last question? Do you mind?
Sure.
So the name of the podcast is Only in America. And all of our guests, I ask the same question at the end. And that question is to finish this sentence. Only in America, ...
Only in America can a woman like me think about flying higher and higher.
Thank you, Molika. And thank you very much again for your leadership, your courage, and your tenacity to push this. And please know that those of us at the National Immigration Forum, we're with you, and we want to help in whatever way possible.
Thank you so much, Ali. I appreciate it.
Molika Gupta works freelance in the patent licensing field and is based in Detroit. She's also founder of the advocacy group Save H-4 EAD and other empowerment groups for H-4 holders. For more information about Molika, please visit our website, immigrationforum.org.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the James Irvine Foundation, expanding opportunity for the people of California, and from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, established in 1911 by Andrew Carnegie to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Noorani. Now, let's spend a few minutes looking at the overall H-1B program. Jackie Veras of the American Action Forum wrote in 2017, "The benefits of H-1B workers are obvious. They fuel innovation, boost economic growth, and fill STEM worker shortages in the United States." I would argue that in the realm of work-based immigration programs, the H-1B visa generates the most attention. But to better understand the program, I talked with Bill Kerr, a professor and distinguished scholar at Harvard University. Among his various areas of concentration, Bill conducts research around high-skilled immigration and its impact on U.S. innovation and growth. Bill grew up in Alabama and made his way to be the Darbeloff Professor of Business Administration at the Harvard Business School. In his most recent book, The Gift of Global Talent, How Migration Shapes Business, Economy, and Society, Bill looks at the global race for talent and how immigration has transformed U.S. innovation. Bill and I spoke about the current state of high-skilled immigration policy, the surprising number of U.S. Nobel Prize winners who are immigrants, and the transformation of his home state. So, Bill, you grew up in Alabama. Where in Alabama?
Outside of Birmingham, a town called Helena.
What was it like in Alabama those days?
Well, this was back in the 1970s, and so I think it would have been maybe 5 miles to the nearest traffic light. There was a lot of open spaces and early stages of development. That part of Alabama today has been transformed by suburbanization, the growth of businesses in the region. So it looks a lot different when I go back.
It is amazing. I mean, that part of Alabama, the auto industry, it's not your mother's Alabama, right?
Well, exactly. When I was a kid, the Mercedes-Benz plant was being lured into Vance, Alabama, which was the start of the automobile industry transformation. But more broadly across that region, you've seen things like the inner cities used to be places that would be avoided. But today, Birmingham's inner city has become a place where a lot of young people want to live. And there's a lot of transformation that's going on that way. So the economy is moving forward and is becoming a more integrated place.
Where did you go after Alabama?
Well, I first went to school in Virginia. I then worked for a couple of years in the Washington, D.C. area, consulting, moving around across the East Coast of the United States, principally. I then spent a couple of years abroad, based out of Hong Kong and traveling around that region. Eventually came to the Boston area to go back to school at MIT, and then have been here ever since then.
So here at Harvard, your specialty is?
So I work in our entrepreneurship and innovation group. I look at how companies either pursue new ideas, in some cases how young entrepreneurs are creating their new organizations. It's really about the pursuit of new opportunities and kind of profitable growth for organizations. And I've had a long-standing interest and research area around high-skill migration and how it impacts U.S. innovation, growth, how organizations get set up to sort of take advantage of the global talent that's here and abroad.
What's your take on the current state of high-skilled migration policy to the U.S.?
Well, there are several elements to unpack in here. And one is like what has specifically been happening around high-skilled policies. And there are some signs I certainly find worrisome. There are questions about the H-4 status for employment opportunities in the future. This is for the spouses of people that are on H-1Bs. There is a growing sense of frustration with approvals or reapprovals of H-1Bs. I think the bigger elephant in the room is sort of the overall rhetoric and tone that's been placed on migration and how that is impacting people's perceptions of the United States.
So let's look at it from, I guess, 3 different levels. One is the global context, then the national economy, and then local examples of the impact of this. So take it away.
So I think the starting point on the global side is an appreciation of just how special the United States has been in the area of global talent. I think it's through 2016, America had roughly 107 Nobel Prize winners that came to the United States for their work, and we've only had 4 Americans that have left and done Nobel Prize winning work outside. And the book actually starts with the Nobel Prize ceremony in 2016, where people working inside the United States won 7 Nobel Prizes, 6 of which went to foreigners. And my trivia question is always, who was the one American that won it? It's Bob Dylan. So it kind of takes us into a different spot. But in general terms, the United States has always been relying on global talent, but it's become ever more important as we move into the 21st century. If you look at inventors in the economy, in 1975, about 1 out of every 12 inventors was an immigrant to the United States. Today, that number is about 1 out of every 3.5. Now, with that sort of backdrop of the importance of global talent to America, there's also some questions about, to what degree is that persisting over time? Overseas opportunities have been rapidly developing. The lifestyles that people can have in emerging countries have also been growing. Their institutions are becoming stronger and so forth. There's a lot of kind of reasons why we wouldn't expect the United States to stay in such a particular role. And if I took one thing that we've been able to measure, historically, about 50% of all college-educated workers who are migrating globally ended up in the United States. And what we're seeing by 2010 is that kind of decreased to 41%. And that's not something that we should necessarily be overly anxious about, because as the world gets stronger, that can benefit all of us. But it's something that also says we can't just rest on our laurels or think that this sort of stimulus to our economy and to our businesses and to our society is just going to naturally persist. So then you get the question of how is the world viewing the United States? And that's a place where I'd break into 2 parts. One is that I don't think I'd ever say U.S. immigration policy has been user-friendly, even to the employer-based migration. And as kind of background, my wife was on an H-1B. We went through the green card process, and she became a naturalized citizen. So I kind of, with her, was following many of these steps. But while it wasn't so always user-friendly, at least you understood what you were getting into. And you could sort of see, this is what the opportunity that lies over here. This is the steps I'm going to have to take in order to make it there. And that kind of certainty allowed people to make investments, even if they were not so pleasant investments at times. Today we've moved to an environment that there's a lot of uncertainty. And if you're thinking about migrating for school, you're looking at this saying, what's the United States' environment going to be in 3 years' time or 4 years' time? In MBA applications, we've had reductions over the last year or 2 all across the board of institutions as people have said, maybe I'm better off placing my opportunities somewhere else.
So that's global. We could have talked about that for another hour. So what's the impact of current migration of talent on the U.S.?
There are a number of implications. One is the role that it has for driving U.S. innovation and where it's conducted. In 1975, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, about 1 out of every 12 inventors in America was an immigrant, and today that number is about 1 out of every 3.5. If I showed you the trend lines are all going up, and in fact, they look like they're accelerating. And we've had wars, we've had 9/11, we've had the Great Recession. There's been a lot that's happened over the 40 years that are in that period. And yet, this is becoming ever more important. So this not only has been a source of kind of pushing innovation forward, it's fundamentally changed American economic geography, or how we are organized for this work. Go back to a midpoint in this process, 1995. So in 1995, the largest U.S. companies were actually underrepresented in the top cities for patenting. So about 40% of the innovations being done by what we call the Fortune 50 or Fortune 100 companies was being done in one of these, kind of like a Silicon Valley or a Boston and so forth. Today that number is at 68%, and it's constantly rising. We went from an era of company towns, and kind of innovation labs that were sort of in the outskirts of places or hidden away, to where now everyone is trying to figure out how they can get into Kendall Square in Boston, or what's their strategy for understanding what's happening around Market Street in San Francisco. It's a very different environment that has implications. Give another example just of how concentrated this has become. In 1975, Indian and Chinese invention in the San Francisco Bay Area kind of already was something noticeable. It's about 1 out of every 220 patents was an Indian or Chinese inventor in San Francisco. Today, that number is 1 out of every 12.
Wow.
If I was to take the lowest patenting state, which is frequently like a North Dakota or Alaska, depending upon the year, if I was to start with that state and just consecutively add up states, in terms of their patenting input, that 1 out of 12 is equal to the output of 28 states in America. So you have had one group that has become very important for innovation at the level that a good chunk of the American kind of states account for. So you can kind of connect this all the way through. This, of course, had implications on where businesses want to be. It has implications on tensions between middle America and the coastal elites. It has questions for organizations. If you don't know how to interact well with Indian and Chinese talent living in the San Francisco Bay Area, you're going to be missing out potentially on an important part of innovation.
But isn't there, so Steve Case has been doing this work for a little while now, kind of rise of the rest, and looking at technology clusters in Pittsburgh, Nashville, et cetera. Are those communities going to be impacted the same way as, Kendall Square or Silicon Valley?
I have an initiative that I lead at Harvard called Managing the Future of Work. And one of the questions that we have is for middle America, for rural locations, how are they thinking about the development process going forward? And the work that Case and others are doing around kind of making sure that many places can look and see this opportunity is great. And there are a couple of examples that I walk through in the book of small towns that have created sort of new tech-based opportunities through their connection to global talent. In fact, the book starts with a very sad story about Olathe, Kansas, which had a developing tech industry. Garmin is there. They've relied a lot on Indian and other global talent to come in and help build that community. But this hasn't been uniformly received. And there's a disgruntled white male in his 50s that goes into a bar one night, yells, "Get out of my country," and shoots two of the Indians. And
this is in Kansas, right?
Kills one, exactly. So it's kind of both the opportunity you can see in that story. You can also see some of the challenges. But to get to your question about kind of, who is favored in this process, there's a mixed bag of things. On one hand, the economics and business logic often favor sort of putting more talent with places that already have that talent. It goes back into the organization of work and kind of the spillovers and what we've in academic terms have called agglomeration economies. Those are very, very powerful pieces, and one kind of leading indicator of this is if you just look at real estate prices, the real estate prices that are being charged in kind of these leading places for access to them have gotten only ever more large compared to all the rest of the places in the country. And that's kind of something that it's building upon there. For other opportunities, though, I would say, what can you do as a local area or as a city, do to think through global opportunities? Cummins, which is a manufacturer. That area around them is the second highest H-1B per capita in the country, behind Silicon Valley.
I was going to bring up Cummins. We did an event with them in Columbus earlier this year, and we're just getting to know them more and more. They're an amazing company.
Yeah, and you can think that this gets us far too far in the weeds, but the way we have structured our high-skilled immigration process is about employers bringing talented people in. And for many people that would be around the world, the opportunity to go to a place in Kansas or a place in Iowa or some other place that we might not say is like the Silicon Valley of the Midwest, that is a great opportunity if they can enter the United States and start that process. So you can use these policies in ways to attract people into remote places or into rural places or places that are trying to move up their economic kind of prospects. But in the end, the overwhelming dynamo here is been favoring talent clusters.
So I'm kind of interested in that Cummins example. Columbus, Indiana, it's created this pretty incredible small city just an hour or two south of Indianapolis. But on the other hand, just outside of Columbus, Indiana, there's a lot of tension. What's the case that we make to middle America that high-skilled immigrants are good for the American worker and their family?
I would start with one of the classic fallacies of the immigration debate, and that's that there's a fixed number of jobs and that we are competing always in a zero-sum game. I fundamentally don't think that that is true, and the history of the United States as well as immigration globally has shown that that's not true. So it's easy to point a finger and say that that's a job that someone locally could have had. But I would begin with first, is that true? What can we do to harness global talent in a way that helps the local environment? We're also trying to make sure our community colleges and local universities are producing the people that the economy needs. There's no degree to which I'm ever in this book advocating you only import global talent as a way of kind of boosting economic development. It works at its best when it's combined in productive ways with natives and with people that are locally moving into the area and helping to catalyze that.
So what are the 3 policy recommendations you would make in this context?
Sure. One of the first set of recommendations goes to how we conduct our employment-based migration into the country. So one thing that I want to begin with is, how can we just make the system better? And I'm advocating in the book for an increase in high-skilled migration into the country. But I say, even if you don't agree with me on that, let's at least begin with, we could have a better environment for using the visas that we do. We currently have a very crude system, and there's a lot that we could do to help make that process more efficient. And what I would then hope would happen from there is that as we see some extra benefits, go back to your rural example. If you go over to the tensions that are in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, as we would see more progress around this, that would help sort of bring voters and people in a line for them making further steps or thinking through that process. And the book goes, for example, through polling data that looks at when people are asked about H-1B visa holders versus around what we call skilled immigrants in the polling questions, you see different levels of response. And I think there's a tension that a number of people are feeling about the way the program is used today. And if we could make that better and more efficient, that would help the whole thing move forward. Another sort of place I get into some policy recommendations is around the education sector and how it's a channel into the labor market. Universities have become very dependent on foreign students coming in part because they pay full fare. But what we have is a process where we have a very fixed number of slots for employment-based work that follow once you enter the workforce, be it the H-1B or be it applications for green cards and so on. Whereas universities do not have a limit on the number of F visas that they can issue. So the pipes are becoming different sizes. And we're trying to, with the OPT program and other stuff, try to make sure that we keep the system kind of in check. But I would like to think about how we could do that process better in terms of giving students a direct access into the labor market for several years. If you went to some of my reforms ideas about how to make the H-1B process better, we'd certainly need to connect up those two to make that process rethought in a more efficient manner. And then actually the other recommendation I make is the biggest one is not a policy recommendation. It's actually a recommendation to business and to the tech community. And it basically is, guys, you have gotten an enormous gift in global talent. You go look at the Facebooks and Microsofts and Googles of the world, as well as Goldman Sachs. These companies have employed global talent to an exceptional degree and have even become particularly good at attracting people in, rewarding them, that sort of keeps this cycle going. And my kind of observation to them is that middle America doesn't always see it the way you do. Right. You make a call for unlimited number of visas, and then you often say something like, and 50% of America's PhDs are immigrants, which is kind of a cross-sectionally true fact today. And yet in middle America, the fact that 50% of America's PhDs are immigrants might not be like an argument for immigration might be. So the point to them is that right now, the policy structure gives you access to these visas at no cost. There's a small filing cost, but it's not like we're auctioning the visas off. And it puts you in the driver's seat for how you want to use these visas. You may not get all the number that you want, but there's a lot of power that comes. And you have to recognize that in the end, this is a political process. Politics determines immigration. Business economics, that's important, but politics is what determines it. And if we don't have a better way of communicating out to the country, and then I'd argue to the world, how global talent is beneficial, then that environment may change on you. How can you make sure that other people feel that this gift is shared in a way that they feel it as well as is benefiting you?
So my message to many folks in Silicon Valley and tech industry is that every time that voter in Kansas hears you say, I need another engineer, that voter immediately thinks you're saying, I need another immigrant. And as a result, I think this is what you're saying, is that companies, in terms of the public debate on this particular issue, kind of are their own worst enemy. Because there's not a collective sense of, yeah, we're in this together when it comes to high-skill migration.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of messaging that needs to be done, and also a lot of thought that needs to be given about how do we make sure that the environment around us is going to want to continue this process and ideally improve it. I mentioned earlier the Managing the Future of Work initiative. You look out to the future and there's stuff that really scares the living bejesus out of all. Whether it's robotics or artificial intelligence or, kind of high skill, these questions about how does this impact me? And companies and CEOs have become much more adept and are concentrating on, what is my role to society? And how do I make sure that the areas around me are productive, healthy in a way that helps my business have the license to operate? I would say bring that thought process and logic into this place as well, but recognize that what we're seeing right now globally is not just a tension against globalization, but there's even around the stuff you have taken for granted, a lot of tension about how am I impacted and what's the benefit for me, and me being broadly, like everyone in the country on global talent flows.
This could be like a 3-part conversation, but I think both of us have to go. So I have one last question for you. Name of the podcast is Only in America. So finish this sentence. Only in America, ...
Only in America does the world right now have the scale and power to utilize global talent the way America does. I think it's a very important as we think about talent races around the world. America has 330 some odd metropolitan areas. They range from Miami to Seattle and everywhere in between. And there's unbelievable scale and opportunity that we have been able to provide. We haven't always gotten it right, but we've always been in a leadership position because of what we could do there. Both the scale, the diversity, our ability to bring people into the workplace, the inclusionary city environments, again, not perfect, but relative to other places has often been a step above. And we need to make sure that we hold on to that and that we're not sort of letting this gift slip from our hands because we're not reinvesting to make it what it can be.
Bill, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Bill Kerr is the Darbeloff Professor of Business Administration at Harvard Business School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's always cold there, trust me, I lived there. He's also co-director of Harvard's Managing the Future of Work initiative. His latest book is The Gift of Global Talent, How Migration Shapes Business, Economy, and Society. For more information about Bill, please visit our website, immigrationforum.org, and while you're there, take a minute to subscribe to Only in America. Only in America is produced by Regina Medina and Emily Chow. Our sound editor is Joanna Taylor. And Kathleen Farrell is the executive producer. I'm Ali Nurani. Thanks so much for listening.